Welcome back to Son of a Glitch, and in this episode we're playing the cult classic Earthbound and checking out some of the insane glitches and skips that speedrunners use to get through this game real quick, and also some of the more hilarious bugs that you might not have seen before. A really substantial glitch used in a speedrun of Earthbound occurs very early in the game and exploits the way the game loads sprites to make a barrier that prevents you from reaching Tucson spawn elsewhere, leaving the path completely open and basically skips all of the stuff you'd have to do in O-Net. This is achieved by overloading the sprite table using button inputs and movements in such a way that the barrier is loaded in a different spot. First, let's take a look at the skip in full and the button inputs that make it happen. When you first reach O-Net, head for the hotel and save the game at the phone, followed by a reset of the console. This resets the RNG or random number generator and will ensure that everything is loaded where it should be when we resume the game from the save select for the sake of consistency. Once the game loads up, head out of the hotel and immediately double tap the A button to open up the menu and talk to nothing. Now move down to this fenced wall and stand for about a second before making your way down this street. When you reach this corner, press A and B and then start moving left towards the bakery, and when you reach this point, press A up and then A again. When you get to this bush, press A twice again to open up the dialog box once more. You should really see the game start to lag now, and when you begin heading south, you'll notice that the red truck will now be replaced by two members of the Sharks and a barrier. This means if you continue heading south, there are now only 3 barriers with a gap where the 4th should be, creating a simple path to Tucson. So what exactly is going on with this skip? Why did the truck turn into a barrier? Well, Earthbound has a sprite rendering limit of 22 sprites on screen at any one time due to memory limitations. These movements during this sequence after the hotel ensure that we overload the sprite table to fill every one of these 22 sprite slots. Sprites can be anything from NPCs, enemies, cars, traffic signals, and most importantly in this case, the barriers that prevent us from reaching Tucson. After leaving the hotel, we head to this fenced wall and wait for this taxi to go off screen and unload, which clears out the entire sprite table, and now as we make our way south, that table begins to fill with new sprites in a controllable way using specific inputs at certain points. You can see that the area outside of what's displayed on screen goes out quite a bit, allowing the sprite table to be filled by things way off screen. When it comes to loading the barriers, there will only be one slot left available to load in new sprites, and that last slot will be taken by one of the barriers. This means the other barrier won't have a slot, and in that case, the slot that the truck is in gets swapped out with whatever would have been in the next available slot and overwrites what was there, so in this case, the truck gets swapped out with the barrier. This overloading of sprites creates one of the most interesting and useful skips in the game when it comes to speedruns, and stuff like this just fascinates me. This episode is sponsored by you. A huge thank you to all the Patreon supporters on screen, and if you want to join them here, there's a link in the description. See you there. Once speedrunners reach Tucson, there are more opportunities to skip significant portions of Earthbound. But first, we need to grab some skip sandwiches from this guy in Berglund Park. This particular item in the game isn't only aptly named, but it's also going to help us skip to the next town. There are certain cliff shapes that allow Ness to clip into the collision with the use of these skip sandwiches, which give a temporary movement speed boost required to bypass it altogether. The first cliff is here by the roadside, and by positioning Ness exactly like this, you can then tap left, down, and you'll eventually clip into the cliff. You don't really need a skip sandwich for this particular clip, as you've just seen. However, if you're struggling with it, it does make it easier and quicker to use one. A skip sandwich makes Ness's walking speed 1.5 times faster for 10 seconds, and a skip sandwich deluxe for 20 seconds, meaning you have a very limited time to get the clip, so bear that in mind. Once out of bounds, you'll be able to move around in ways not intended, crossing into areas you otherwise wouldn't have access to, and reach other cliffs to clip through. Here is a particularly tricky one that does require a skip sandwich to pass through, but again we'll be wiggling Ness into this corner edge, alternating between pressing up and right until you can clip through the cliff. You'll now have access to the haunted tunnel where ghosts force Ness through it, which leads you to Threed. The tunnel and these ghosts are normally intended to block progress into Dusty Dunes Desert until Master Belch is defeated, however that's not an issue during a speedrun with these clips. And while skipping Tucson also skips rescuing Paula, the game adds Paula to your party when Jeff reaches Threed, so again, no issue there. Speaking of Jeff, during winters there's also some cliffs to clip through here too. Once Jeff escapes Snowwood boarding school, head to the shop and sell the big bottle rocket, broken spray can, and the pop gun to get enough money to buy 2 skip sandwich DXs. You then need to head a short way down and then left past some trees to this area here with another wall of collision we can clip through using a skip sandwich deluxe. This will give us 20 seconds to frantically wiggle between up and left on the D-pad to hopefully clip through the solid wall and then begin moving out of bounds. This is one of the trickiest clips of the 4 used in an any percent speedrun and requires some effort on the player's side and a little bit of patience too, but eventually you should go through the collision. You're now able to traverse this out of bounds area and make your way to this spot outside Dr. Andernut's laboratory. We're once again going to use a skip sandwich deluxe to wiggle through this wall, which is significantly easier than the one before it, and now we can get into the lab skipping all of Winters. So how exactly is this possible? Well, Earthbound, like many pixel art games of the era, are made up of these tiles, 8 by 8 pixels across. Certain tiles are programmed to be solid, impassable by the player, but placed in such a way that there are these 1 by 1 tile gaps that NES can actually get into with a combination of horizontal and vertical movements. By pressing and alternating between either up, down, left, or right, depending on the situation, it's possible for NES to slip through the corners of the collision tiles. If you move too far in any one direction whilst trying to clip, NES will get pushed out of the collision and you'll have to set the skip up again. Precise positioning is pretty key to getting these skips successfully. However, with a skip sandwich and some frantic wiggling on the D-pad, as you've seen, it's possible to clip through certain spaces to skip huge parts of the game and is absolutely crucial to getting faster times in a speedrun. When you reach Tucson, you'll be able to get hold of a bicycle, which on the outset doesn't look like it would have any bugs associated with it, but we're about to learn that that's not the case at all. Pressing the R button rings the bike's bell, which behaves, as expected. If you play the game for 2 hours straight, Ness's dad will call you to see if you wish to take a break. Upon politely declining this offer, you'll find that the bike's bell now makes another sound entirely. It will now make a horn sound for some unknown reason, and the bike music will also be gone too, leaving the town theme playing in the background instead. Ultimately, this isn't a huge glitch, but a very interesting minor glitch many players wouldn't ever encounter. Another strange glitch you can do with the bicycle takes place in Tucson and once again involves overloading the sprite table. Use the bicycle and then begin riding south from Berglund Park, where you'll begin to see enemies spawning in. Don't let them touch you and initiate a fight, and likewise don't get too far away from them so they wander off. Instead, just keep a balanced distance away from them as you round up more and more. With 10 enemies on screen, the game will stop loading in new ones as it manages memory limitations, so now we want to take all these guys back to Berglund Park. Within this market area are now more than 22 sprites with our 10 enemies in tow, and this can have a strange effect once we venture around a bit more. One of the enemies will be swapped out with another character sprite, and engaging in a battle with said character causes the game to glitch out. You'll get partway into a fight with them before the game dramatically crashes, resets, or just bugs out. Clearly, the game doesn't have any contingency for getting into fights with regular NPCs, and so it freaks out. And I'm not sure about this, but this could also affect the game's save data. So if you try this, be sure you're okay with the consequences. But this really is one of those crazy glitch moments you wouldn't expect. In Earthbound, there's a status ailment called Diamond, which renders a party member unable to fight or be the target of an attack. In the overworld, this status effect is visualized by the party member being diamondized as they follow the rest of the team around. If you use the ability to teleport whilst the party member has this in effect and bump into a wall, every member will now look as though they're diamondized as well for a few frames before returning to normal, except for the member that actually had the diamond ailment. Not entirely sure why this occurs, and it doesn't affect anything, but it sure is weird. One of Earthbound's most infamous glitches actually takes place right at the end of the game once you've finally taken care of Gygus. Much earlier in the adventure, you'll reach the Summers Museum, and inside is a room with 2 enemies, both called the Shattered Man. It's possible to enter this room, read the hieroglyphics, and then leave the room without ever fighting either of these 2 Shattered Man enemies. It also doesn't matter if you beat one of the Shattered Man enemies, as long as one of them remains when you leave this room, you're all good. Fast forward to the end of the game, and upon beating Gygus, you're supposed to teleport back to Onett, but instead go back to Summers and head to this room in the museum with these 2 Shattered Man enemies you didn't beat. At this point in the game, there should be no enemies to get into fights with. However, with the Shattered Man still alive and kicking, enter the fight right next to the door and then purposely die to them, and something unexpected will happen. Ness and Paula will die, and the game will try to go to the game over screen, but will look like it crashed. In fact, you still have control of Ness, meaning if you press left, you'll go through the door to leave this room, and be greeted with this glitchy mess in the next room. It looks as though these sprite tiles for the museum haven't loaded in correctly, and it now looks like nightmare fuel. Oh, you're also a ghost now too. Yeah, probably should have mentioned that part first. Because there were supposed to be no enemies at this point in the game, there's no contingency for entering a fight and dying, which is why the game is in this odd state. You have full control over where you go now, provided it's within summers, as because you're dead, you won't be able to teleport, which is inconvenient. I would have thought being a ghost would make it easier to get around. Anyway, at least the game's visuals return to normal once you leave the museum. That's something. You can even have your photo taken, where Ness fuzzy pickles himself back to life for a couple of seconds before realizing, oh yeah, I'm dead. Despite not being able to teleport in this state, you can still take the boat to Scarborough if you wanted, although that's as far as you'd go, so not too much point to that. You're also not stuck being a ghost in this last part of the game either, as you can go to the hospital, and provided you have enough money, you can actually be healed back to full health, allowing you to teleport out of summers and carry on finishing the game. This is a really crazy glitch that was sadly fixed in the Mother 1+2 release of the game. Ah well, we'll always have the memories. The most complicated speedrun skip in Earthbound comes in the form of its most game-breaking glitch, the stairs glitch. Simply explained, if an interruption occurs while on stairs, such as a phone call or a critical health warning, the player stops walking while on the stairs, and this puts the character in an odd state which allows the player to walk through any solid object. The easiest way to get a message to interrupt play is to get an ailment like poison or a cold during a fight, and once in the overworld, the player's health will tick down until it's at a critical point. The game will then display a message to warn of the player's impending doom, and if this text box appears on the correct frame of the stairs transition animation, when input resumes, you'll be able to move in any direction away from the stairs with the player's collision disabled. The player won't be able to interact with things like NPCs, doors, or objects, and you won't be able to see the other areas of the map, as the game only loads the tile map of the area you were in when you triggered the stairs glitch. You will, however, still be able to hear the music associated with that area as a kind of musical guide to where you are currently on the map. Traveling throughout an entirely dark map is still kind of tricky though, but thankfully you'll be able to use the soundstone you were given earlier in the game to reload the area you're in, and this also loads the tile maps correctly, and now you're able to see exactly where you are. The soundstone also enables door interaction again, while still having the player's collision disabled, but if you go through a door, the player's collision is re-enabled. And to fix the glitch entirely, just walk onto another staircase and the game's collision returns to normal. So how is the stair glitch beneficial in a speedrun? Well, once you've gained the ability to go anywhere, you can reach any point of the map, as the entire game is comprised of one giant map. Areas aren't placed logically, instead the map is laid out in economical ways to fit as much of it as possible in the space available, meaning rooms that would usually be in completely different areas of the game are right next to each other. It's this knowledge that allows movement around the game via different rooms to get to where you want to go fast. You would imagine that from this point in a speedrun, you'd be able to go straight to Gygus and finish the game. However, your team is incredibly underpowered, and even if you did get through to the last stage of the fight, the game would softlock during the first prayer scene. This is because there are a couple of event flags that need to be activated during the game to have these scenes play out properly. The 2 event flags are required to initiate the Phase Distorter quest in Saturn Valley, which involves falling through the hole in Lumine Hall, leading to the Lost Underworld, which makes Dr. Andernuts arrive in Saturn Valley. The second event flag is defeat Ness's Nightmare in Magicant, which causes the Phase Distorter to appear. With these 2 event flags set, the team will also level up enough to actually get through the first 2 Gygus phases, and then get through the prayer cutscene no problem. This is a very broad explanation of the stairs glitch and its uses, but it's easily one of the craziest glitches in the game for sure. Debug menus are typically something not accessible to the player within a game, however, there are several spots in Earthbound that, when checked, can cause the game to read an arbitrary address in memory, and interesting results can occur from having access to the debug tools. This is the check area glitch, and the spots where you can perform it are usually located along the outer edges of the game map and are normally inaccessible, or at least they should be. The spot we'll take a look at pulling this glitch off is in the northeast corner of Onet, and can be reached by using the skip sandwich glitch to clip through this cliff. By pressing L to check this area in the corner, you'll repeatedly be told no problem here, But if you persist, eventually you'll see that the dialog box is filled with random nonsense that can sometimes last for a minute or two. It's within this nonsense that the debug menu can be found, but not without using a second controller and pressing a sequence of buttons at exactly the right times. With the R button held on the second player controller, press L on the first player controller and check the area in the corner. Keep checking the area until you're presented with an empty dialog box, and whether the empty box appears or not is apparently random, and it may take a minute, but hopefully it should present itself after you see a text string of ho 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 in the box. Once the empty box appears, there is a guaranteed method for opening the debug menu. Release the R button on the second player controller, and exactly 11 or 13 frames later, dismiss the empty box while pressing down, right, A, B, and Y on the first player controller. You need incredible timing for this, and it will most likely take you more than a few attempts, but if you're successful, you should now see this glorious window of nonsense. This is the debug menu, and if we make sense of it, this is what all of these options control. You can add or take away party members, give them any ailment, edit how much money you're currently carrying, add items to our inventory, warp to any location in the game, level up any member of the party, go to an event in the game rather than an area, and even check out the sounds in the game. The debug menu is pretty extensive to cover all by itself, with many of the options being self-explanatory, and the more you mess with it, the more you understand what everything does. And it's fun to explore each section to see the results. In a speedrun category dedicated to the use of the debug menu, runners try to reach this corner of O-Net as fast as possible to hopefully open up the debug menu and go directly to the end of the game using the go to event option, which effectively skips the entire game as you'd expect. The other part of the game that you can famously see the check area glitch is the 3 tent, which if you check this area by the pillar, odd things can occur once again. This part of the game map is positioned at the bottom right corner of the whole game map, and since this exact corner is open to the void, much like the corner in O-Net, you'll be able to get these odd dialog boxes again. This glitch is incredibly unpredictable, you just never know what weird thing it'll come up with. Some results being fairly tame, while others being straight up broken. I mean, there are zombies involved in this one, but that never comes to any fruition, and it also won't stop, so yeah. It's also possible to bring up the debug menu too, although it's somewhat less reliable than the O-Net version, and there is seemingly no guaranteed way of getting it to appear. You have to be incredibly patient and very lucky, I guess. The debug menu is indeed a powerful tool, and if you're playing on a modern port or have some use of save states, it's a great thing to play around with. It's just sad there isn't an easier, less convoluted way of having access to it. If you're feeling brave enough and have the patience, it's worth trying out at least once. How else are you gonna see all this crazy stuff happening? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode.